Welcome to the Liberator Method Class 4, Your Compelling Mind. My name is Rhonda Christensen. I'm assuming you've viewed the first 3 classes and become familiar with the perspective, principles, and tools of the Liberator Method. You're aware you are a divine being having a human experience. Your fundamental nature is unconditional love and creative power, and your purpose is to come to know yourself as thyself. In other words, you are becoming consciously aware that your fundamental nature is unconditional love and creative power. You are also becoming aware that your words literally create and uphold your experience. As you intend to become aware of and accept responsibility for your word choice, you halt the repetitive cycle of being unconsciously driven or compelled, and you intentionally open the space for consciously chosen experience to manifest. Finally, you're beginning to use your new consciously empowered language to declare and assert what you want in the form of a clearly stated affirmation. An I am statement of intention declared in the present tense, as if the experience you desire has already fully manifested itself. Now let's move into Class 4, Your Compelling Mind. The word compel means to force or drive to a course of action with a strong, irresistible force or influence. Your mind is a compelling force. More specifically, the conclusions and decisions you make up with your mind drive your body to literally manifest the experience you called forth. Let me show you what I mean. The process of soul awakening involves the observation of your decision-making and the experience that follows. And by the way, when I use the word soul, I am referring to your mind, body, and spirit as one. Now, this process of awakening is basically the spiritual version of the scientific method. It is the observation and testing of the resulting experience of a subconsciously chosen hypothesis. So bring your attention to the bullets on the left side of your screen. Your mind is your servant. Its job is to make choices in accordance with your spiritual will. Its purpose is to figure out your physical sensory experience through the tool of literal logic, which eventually gives you the opportunity to define and refine your will. Now remember from our first class that logic is the science of pure reason. Our logical decisions literally determine our physical experience that follows. In other words, the word choice of your decision forms a sentence that plays itself out literally, word for word. Our universe is absolutely, precisely literal. Once the sentence is declared, and this includes the work you're doing with your affirmations, the body begins to play out the sentence and gives sensory feedback. The mind then observes the feedback and has the opportunity to redefine and filter the original decision until it gets it just right. Now let's look at the right side of the screen to get a better idea of what this legalistic process looks like. First, your unaware spirit aspect of your soul encounters a problem or an experience that presents an idea that's out of alignment with your unconditionally loving nature. Unaware of your authority and your creative power, you misperceive reality and a cycle is set in motion. This experience presents your mind aspect with a choice, a possibility that had not been previously considered nor even seen. Your mind then exercises your freedom to choose and makes a conclusion or a judgment about itself. And this conclusion is followed by a decision about subsequent behavior, a decision that becomes your legally declared sentence. When your body hears the decision or legally declared sentence of your authoritative mind or your judge, it complies with the sentence you've obligated it to, word for word, until you experience the results, find the means to recognize the misconceived judgment, and consciously choose to release yourself from it. Awareness begins to emerge when you consciously choose to entertain the possibility that you are not who you have decided yourself to be. As you detach and observe all aspects of yourself while in the actual experience, you'll discover that you've been the innocent author and creator of your experience all along. Now, I know this is a lot of information to absorb, but stay with me on this. It's going to get easier. Before we move on, I want to recap the fundamental elements one more time. The spirit aspect of your soul encounters the shock of a physical world experience that's out of alignment with its nature and misperceives it as reality. Your mind makes a conclusion or a judgment about the nature of your being, and then a decision about your behavior. This decision becomes your new behavioral law. Next, your body, because your soul, by nature, is integrity, is obligated to serve the literal word-for-word sentence of your decision. Awareness begins to emerge when you're willing to observe your experience and separate the misperceptions in the judgment and the law that you've proclaimed for yourself. The previous experience, misperceived to be irrational, actually makes perfect sense, logically and sensually. Again, I know this is a lot of deep information, so let's look at an example of this process taken from an actual client experience. Now, the issue that had manifested for this client when he came to me, a powerlifter, was the recurring experience of the loss and gain of up to 50 pounds of weight, combined with periodic episodes of physical injury to his lower back. As I began working with his emotional feedback in session, I observed that any time we encountered getting close to the root feelings, he would experience anxiety and tell me he was in bad shape. At first, when I noticed this pattern and asked what this meant to him, he was not able to put it into words. However, with encouragement, he was able to identify and express feelings of shame surrounding core feelings of weakness. Now look at the slide to separate the anatomy of his issue. His earliest recollection of this experience was the true physical reality of physical injury and emotional betrayal that he felt as a child when he was being beaten by his alcoholic father. He had the sensation during this experience that something was not right. He was, in reality, experiencing himself as physically powerless to defend himself. However, due to the fact that he considered his father as a faultless and respected authority figure, his mind misperceived that something must be wrong with him. Now, as a side note, in logic, the science of pure reason, there is a world of difference between something being not right and something being absolutely wrong. Wrong is the extreme polar opposite of right, the very most extreme end of the spectrum of not right. I'm not going to go into this any deeper, but suffice it to say, this innocent boy assumed the very most extreme possible negative conclusion about himself. After his misperception, something must be wrong with me, this young boy concluded, I must be weak. However, in this boy's family, the expression of weakness was seen as an admission of vulnerability, a condition that this boy had decided was bad and not allowed. The conclusion of I must be weak was spontaneously translated and expressed as I must be in bad shape. Next, the decision was made. This decision represents a logical attempt to bring oneself back into alignment, to compensate for whatever was decided to be wrong. In this boy's case, the compensatory logical decision was, if I prove I'm not in bad shape, then I must not be weak. This is his mind's logical attempt to defend himself from a conclusion he made based on a fundamental misperception of reality. Now here's the part I find absolutely fascinating. The body. Recall that the body hears the literal sentences of the judgments and the decision, word for word, and then dutifully obeys. The conclusion, I am in bad shape, manifests itself literally as a body in bad shape. The decision, if I prove I am not in bad shape, then I must not be weak, is the behavioral sentence that plays itself out. In this case, as the boy grew, he felt compelled to be a powerlifter. Big clue, by the way, that the underlying issue was powerlessness. As an attempt to prove he was not in bad shape, his focus was solely on strength. He did not focus on integrating form, and since form is an integral element in the true definition of power, he continued to experience himself as less than powerful. Because his form was at times out of alignment, he was prone to re-experience the original experience of physical hurt and injury, which eventually brought him back right to the experience of physical weakness, or the condition of a being in bad shape. It was a vicious cycle. Willing to accept responsibility and open his eyes to the anatomy and logical reasoning of the choices he had made, he became aware of his creative power. He released the cycle by accurately expressing, "As a child, I was a divine being having a human experience of physical injury and emotional betrayal by a man I perceived to be an unquestionable authority. I see that I misperceived reality when I concluded that something must be wrong with me." He accepted and surrendered to his previous experience of powerlessness without making himself or anyone else, including his father, wrong. His weight evened out, and he reclaimed his freedom to choose whether or not he wanted to powerlift, rather than feeling compelled to in order to prove himself to be not weak. The soul awakening process is flawless, faultless, and perfectly reasonable. Your mind, body, and spirit are contractually bound to make logic out of sense. The awakening process is extraordinary and inspiring, as are you, a divine being of absolute integrity having a human experience. This concludes Class 4. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you choose to stay posted for more.